Leo Fender got it right the first time around.
He was the right guy at the right time.
It was like creating the wheel. They hit it right on the money the first time out. And then everything seems to be a knockoff of their original ideas.
Just as one of those weird examples in history where the initial design encompassed so many more things than they bargained for. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of perfection.
I think the Telecaster is the perfect guitar. I think it's the perfect design. I think, especially for a female, I think because of the size of it, that's another reason why I've always felt really comfortable in it. I found guitars like the Strat is too long and didn't really suit my body. And I think this has got a great size. It's easy to hold. It fits everywhere it needs to fit on me, and it's just right. There's just something right about it.
You can't improve on it, really. It never has been improved on. It's been messed about with. People have done all sorts of things to them. But the initial design, as far as solid guitars goes, was designed and that was it. It's never really changed. And there's nothing there's nowhere to go with it. Because when he designed it, as far as this goes, he designed what was perfect.
Which is amazing. I mean, this thing was made before I could even play guitar.
The Fender Telecaster, bad to the bone.
It's wonderful. Get you some of that.
How he knew what he knew it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing because he had obviously a good electronic knowledge, but he had a real feel for musicality too. You know, you always read about how he'd go hear bands and he always wanted it to be cleaner and clearer. And how did he know? He did the perfect thing right off from the beginning. You know, with this and a Strat.
I mean, like many other great inventions, the first one's the best. What's amazing about it, I think, is that Leo had the concept of making an electric guitar. But not just that, he also made the amplifiers to match the guitar. Nobody had the all-round idea and the concepts that an electric guitar is like two things. It's the guitar itself and the amplifier, and that they have to match. So he must have been doing some incredible electronic works in order to bring this thing to fruition.
That's what genius is, you know, when you have a flash and it works. And the design of this just works. And through particular amps, it is the greatest. I mean, look at Jimmy Page, the first and second Led Zeppelin albums are a Telecaster through a Supro amp. You know, that's a weird combination, but that's an amazing sound that he got.
You only realize the true joy of a Telecaster when you're putting it through a Fender amp as well, a Fender Twin reverb, you know. Hey, you know, give me that, I've gone to heaven.
I think it is important to have a Fender guitar with a Fender amp. I'm old school, but I think so, yeah. I think it just sounds, a Fender tube amp and a good Fender guitar. I mean, if you can't get a sound out of that, then the problem is with you. Consistently, I play through a Fender Bassman 410, 59 reissue Bassman 410 Fender amplifier, which I have also used for years and years, over 20 years. And the reason I chose that amp is I use it with a reverb pedal. That's about it. And the reason I chose that amp is because it never breaks down and it's always really consistent the way it sounds. And I think it's got a really good meaty sound. You can do pretty much get a clean tone, an overdriven tone, or something in between, which is usually what I go for. And it's just real consistent, simple, consistent.
If I was stranded on an island, this would be the thing I wanted, I think, because it has less to go wrong. Very good little instrument, this. It's so honest and straightforward, it challenges you, you know what I mean?
Anything I do or any kind of music you play can be done on this guitar. Of course, but then you can also any kind of weird thing you can think of.
It's cross-genre. Everybody can use it in any genre. You've got players in country like Keith Urban, Brad Paisley. You've got players like Richie Kotzen who can shred on it, and then you've got your other players like indie players that can really, real jangly chords and stuff. And it's just so diverse that you can do anything with it. And at the end of the day, it sounds brilliant no matter what's done with it.
When people don't want all the frills and they want the straight ahead, 3 chords and the truth, it's very difficult to beat a Telecaster.
Yeah, man, 3 chords and the truth, that makes sense to me. It's a simple instrument, it's easy to play, it's easy to get a sound out of, and it's easy for me to be me when I'm playing a Telecaster.
Just a great sound. There's something about a Telecaster versus any other guitar that I know of, the vibration of the strings against the neck. There's something about the design of this right here that's just special and different from any other guitar.
I started playing when I was 13 years old, and the guitar just felt right for me. The neck was beautiful, the sound was great, and I just love playing that guitar. It's very well balanced and travels good, and if you drop it, you don't have to worry about hurting it, It makes it sound better. A little dirt on it makes it sound good. And it's just a great guitar for me.
Comfortable on my body, and like even last night, I got to the hotel. The first thing I did was take it out of the case and lean it up against the chair so when I was in bed I could see it. It makes me feel good. You know, it makes me, oh, okay, it's cool. I can go to sleep now. Everything's all right. I am, you know, pretty fanatical about them.
Leo was a country western fan, and as well as a big fan of the standard guitar. So he, when Charlie Hayes, the salesman, came to him and asked for an electric Spanish guitar that they could sell in the Fender line, when he started thinking about the whole idea of the Esquire and the Broadcaster, which would become the Telecaster, he started actually with this lap steel, which is the Champion lap steel. Now, this particular guitar was made in the mid-50s, but they made this guitar for about six or 7 years. In 1949 and 48 and 49 is when they really started mapping it out. And the thing that was interesting about it is it had some of the features that would end up in the Telecaster. Probably the most important feature is the strings went through the body. You can see on the back of this one how they mount through here. And that, of course, gives the guitar more sustain. Leo had seen Rickenbackers, and they were made pretty much like this as well. The dome knobs, the single volume control, the single tone control. The slanted lead pickup, that this is really a key to the Telecaster sound, at least that lead guitar, that sharp biting sound that we're familiar with, is the slanted pickup here. Now, the pickups on these guitars on the lap steels are identical to the Tele pickup, except for the bottom mounting bracket's different, or the mounting plate on the bobbin is different shape, and doesn't have the elevator plate on it that lifts it up and down, although it is adjustable. And it gives that enhanced bass. You get a lot of bass because of the angle that the pickup sits, and of course you get a lot of treble as well. So that was really the sound. That sort of in a nutshell that explains what tone Leo was going for. That deep bass, high treble, and then the mid range is kind of gone. And people say, well, you know, that kind of sounds crazy, and because a lot of people really like that mid range. But what Leo really wanted to do was showcase or frame the sound of a human voice, a singer. So you'd have the low bass notes, and then and the high treble, and that really would create a frame for a solo singer. And of course that became the Fender sound, because it also would penetrate off the stage. And you know, if you wanted to take a lead break with authority, you just flop it back to that back pickup, and you had all the authority you'd ever need.
Fender now is making a G.E. Smith model Telecaster, and you see here the pickup is set right down into the wood, not hanging in that metal plate the way a normal Tele would be. The plate's just cut off. This is not something I thought of. Leo Fender did this, the Champion lap steel, which I think started in '48. I always liked those. I always thought they were cool, so I bought a bunch of them over the years. You know, lap steels in the 60s and 70s were free. You know, you could buy them for $15, $20 in any pawn shop, and I bought a lot of those. And I could see that it was a Tele pickup, you know, in there, but it was screwed right into the wood. And it had this inlay pattern. So there's nothing on my guitar that Leo Fender didn't think of. And way back when, I once saw Roy Buchanan play. And he had his Tele, and he had the bridge cut, and he had it screwed right in, not the famous 53 one, another Tele. You know, he had a bunch of Teles too. So you know, I'm not the first guy that's aware of this. And it always seemed like if you could get a really early one of those lap steels, the ones with slot screws, right? Which, you know, this is way back. We didn't know how to date stuff. It was just old stuff, right? We knew that the ones with slot screws, the pickups were hotter. So we would take those pickups and put them in a Tele. And it seemed to be a good sound.
So Leo wanted to build the Hawaiian guitar into the Spanish guitar. And that was the key to Leo Fender's perspective on this. He wanted to be able to get that sound. What was that sound? So you can see how that fed into not only the Telecaster, but later with the vibrato arm on the Stratocaster. So there's a logical connection between all these products. Leo succeeded in getting the Hawaiian guitar into the Telecaster. You know, the idea of the solid body, the slanted pickup, the strings through the body, the straight string pull at the top. You know, this doesn't have a Tele headstock, but the strings go, if you notice, they go over the top of the nut here in a straight fashion. That was key to the whole thing. This idea of emphasizing sustain. You know, a lot of people don't realize that the pickup itself is built for sustain. I mean, the frequency that it's tuned at. He wanted to sustain the overtones, and so when you get those chimes, like Roy Buchanan used to use those harmonics all the time, that really is a big part of that whole Telecaster sound.
The way the Esquire works is when the switch is in the bridge position, it's full treble from the bridge pickup. When you put this in the middle, it allows you to work the tone control, so you can actually vary the amount of tone. So you could set it like maybe halfway, so you go full treble, and then half, so like a better rhythm sound, and then when you're up, you had like a 0.1 capacitor to ground, and it would make it sound real bassy. So you would have, like, for jazzy sound, they were trying to play in between the jazz and bluesy sound. Some of the early broadcasters actually had a blend switch. So here it would be a bass sound using the neck pickup. In the middle, the blend switch would work, so you could turn. This wouldn't actually work a tone control. It would blend the bridge pickup in with the neck pickup. And then when it's here, it was just full treble by itself, and this wouldn't work at all. So that was a unique thing. But they got rid of that, and then on the normal Tele in 53, 52. When it's in the bridge, it worked the tone control, and the bridge pickup. In the middle, it worked the rhythm pickup, and then the tone control would work. And then here, it was just the neck pickup, and it was a bassy sound. It was very deep sounding. A lot of guys didn't like that, you know. And then in the later 60s, they went to where the bridge pickup would work here. In the middle, it would be the bridge and neck pickup, and then when it was up, it would just work the neck pickup. So that was kind of a unique thing. But this bridge plate is so important. A lot of guys are using brass plates today or stainless steel, and it'll make the pickup sound so much brighter for some reason, because it's not pulling the magnetic field out from the coil, from the bobbin, and it just saturates. It makes it too bright. It makes it too tinny for me, which I don't like at all, you know.
You know, I think it suits so many styles of music. You know, I've heard some great jazz players playing Teles, you know, and of course it's got that country twang. But, you know, there are a lot of blues players too who use it, you know.
Arguably, when, you know, if I'm in a session and I need to conjure up the sound of a hollow body guitar that's going to be convincing, or just a nice clean sound where people go, hey, that sounds like a jazz guitar, the neck pickup on a Telecaster will do it every time. By the same token, if I want to sound like Leo Nascitelli from the Meters, or get my Steve Cropper on, you know, I can funkify on this like no other instrument. I mean, you know, Prince himself uses, you know, back in the day, used a Tele to get all that, you know, funkification. And then, of course, the back pickup on a Tele, you know, a lot of people think of it as more of the chicken picking thing, which it definitely can do, but you put a little snarl on this thing and it'll rock with the best of them and really cuts through.
And to me, the bridge pickup, there's nothing that sounds like that pickup in this housing with the little hole that's under there and anything else. I've seen other ones that have just the pickup screwed to the hole. They don't get it. To me, they just don't. They're okay. They're good guitars, but they don't sound like this. Not at all. So there's something about that. And this one, funky as they are sometimes, if you get them in the right position and match them up so they're matched well, to me, that's one of the best sounds in the world right there in the middle. It's just a great rhythm sound, a great lead sound. And I think if you broke back a tone off just a little, jazzy enough. I mean, it's no L5 or nothing, but neither's the price, you know. I mean, just for stock great guitars, they're just, to me, they're just so universal, and I guess that's it. You can use them in any kind of style, I think, you know. And this is a great rhythm sound. Sound, of course, it's the old nothing twangs like that.
A very simple guitar, and simplicity is very important, you know, and yet makes a sound like that. It's amazing.
The intonation has been the main concern with Teles with their 3 saddle bridges, and I, like many other people, switched to 6 saddles. But I was told by somebody who'd been playing a lot longer than I was that I was really compromising my sound by doing so. And as it turned out, I then compared my guitar to a guitar that had 3 saddles on it, and I found that the other guitar had a lot more sustain, more output, everything. When you think about it, you've got, instead of 6 smallish saddles, you know, very tiny, with the pressure of just 1 string per saddle holding it down, it's not going to have the same power as a much larger saddle, particularly made out of a non-ferrous material like brass, held very firmly down by the weight and power of 2 strings per saddle. That thing's not going to budge when you hit it. And that means more sustain, it means more output, and it's because of the brass and whatever, it's also a warmer and nicer tone. So even even when people had issues with the intonation, they'd still rather try to get around it a different way rather than have perfection here, but at the cost of losing tone, because everybody's after the tone first. They want that golden tone. And if they have to suffer a slight intonation thing, people can bend a little bit or they tune their guitars slightly. And how in tune does that make your guitars anyway when you've got the individual control? Is it perfect with every chord shape? It's not, even when you've got total control. 12th fret harmonics, perfectly in tune with the 12th fret notes. Fine with that shape chord, fine with this usually. But when you go to that chord, it usually sounds something like, you get that major third syndrome that you get also usually here, And for many years, I think a lot of people have also done this, because our ears will accept maybe 5 cents of flatness, before we notice that it's flat. We notice sharpness almost right away. It only has to even hint at being sharp and it sounds terrible, this, if I bend it, it's like a horrible sound. But what I've done is, over the years, is I've detuned the G string very, very slightly. Just, not so that it was noticeably out of tune when you played an E minor, but then when you went to a major, it still sounded sweet, So our ears perceive both chords as being, you have to utilize this technique of purposely detuning something or making it a little out of tune to make everything overall sound in tune. Because when you get everything perfect on the meters and all of that, it's going to sound terrible in reality. Now the reason that sounds in tune, where it doesn't on my Stratocasters, is because what you do with the center saddle, which is the one that causes the problems, because it's the only saddle where it shares a wound string and a plain string. With this saddle, you've got 2 plain strings. This saddle, you've got 2 wound. So it's going to be more of an issue with this middle saddle. You get the G string sounding perfectly in tune, the D is going to be considerably flat. And if you get the D perfectly and the G, of course, going to be perfectly sharp. But having the D slightly flat is actually kind of, again, if it's not too flat, you split the difference, basically. You use compromise so that the D is going to be slightly flat if you're looking at the meter, and the G is going to be very slightly sharp. But because I've detuned the G string here, when you play the G note there, I mean, if the string were perfectly in tune because of where the saddle lies, like I said, you're using compromise, it'll show up as being marginally sharp. But because that's flat, it's actually in tune here, you see. And the D, being very slightly flat, you don't get that major third syndrome when you play that chord, you see. That's why that sounds in tune, whereas normally it sounds awful. So all my Teles were sounding more in tune than my Strats. So since then I've gone back to my Strats and purposely made those adjustments, make the D purposely slightly flat, the G slightly sharp, so that when I detune this, again, not so much that you notice it, because like I say, the ears will accept, 5 cents or maybe even a bit more of flatness. You can't hear that as really being flat, but it's flat enough that when you go to the major, it doesn't sound like most guitars do. So you don't need a fighting nut on your 52 Tele that's going to devalue it,
When I think about the Telecaster, one of the first things I think about is there's no place to hide. There's no whammy bar to get you out of trouble and to resolve it if you're making a bad move. It's very unforgiving, but at the same time, it offers no mask to your playing. That's what gives it such a versatility, and it really doesn't mask the identity of players. So you have such a broad spectrum of players that embrace the Telecaster because their individual voice seems to come through.
It does allow your true personality to come through. Because of its simplicity, there's nothing getting in the way of you and your communication of your musical thoughts and ideas and concepts. And that's what an instrument should be. An instrument should be pure and simple and allow the person to speak through the instrument. And that's what the Telecaster does.
I mean, the Strats are probably, far more obvious because they're more versatile. But the Telecaster gets you and puts you in its own bag. You know, once you pick one of those up, you've got to play it its way. You can't try and make it sound like anything else or do anything like that. Or it's, you have to become real friends with it.
It's just basically your hands and this pure instrument, like a blank canvas that it's up to you to kind of do what you're going to do because it's not going to do it for you. Let's put it that way.
You can't really fake it on a Tele. You can either play or you can't because it's so simple, it's so clean that you can't really count on the guitar playing for you. It really takes the hands of the player to make this guitar work.
I mean, if you can't play, you can't play a Tele. You know, it's a guitar that you have to work at to make it sound good. But if you can make it sound good, it's the best sounding guitar there is, as far as I'm concerned. And I just think it's the coolest looking guitar as well.
In my opinion, you should never sit down and play a Telecaster. It's not a sitting down guitar, it's a rebel's guitar. You know, you should show it respect, you stand up with it and you play it, as your machine. And especially a girl should never sit down with a Telecaster because your boob goes into the dip and it's not rock and roll.
For me, it feels fine and it holds my breast really well. No, I'm just kidding. But
Hey, ask any picker, nobody's going to knock that machine, You might prefer something else because it's not that versatile, given sound-wise, it imposes itself upon you, and you have to make a deal with it.
This is about as basic as you could get it, and the fact is that the shape is amazing. I mean, you can take all your custom guitars, they try to improve the shape, but you're never going to improve the shape of this or the Strat. It's kind of 50s space age kind of, but it's stood the test of time.
Okay, in summer of 1949, they'd already started a prototype of the Esquire. It was a single pickup guitar, and it's been replicated by the custom shop. And it had the snakehead snakehead headstock, very similar to the lap steel. And Don Randall wanted them to get this sample ready to take back to the trade show in 1949, but it wasn't ready yet. And the reason it wasn't ready was because Leo was a perfectionist. He really wanted things to be perfect, and in his own mind, he hadn't really perfected it. Another thing came about that I think influenced Leo's thinking, and that is he finally saw the Bigsby guitar that Paul Bigsby had made for Merle Travis. And I think that he was thinking, well, geez, I'm going to have to take this up a notch because Bigsby's going to come out with this guitar. Bigsby had no intention of mass-producing Bigsby's, but I think Leo probably in the back of his mind thought that he probably would, if it was a viable idea, that he would, if he didn't jump on it, he would lose some ground. And Leo, of course, by this time was a businessman. He had a factory to run, and he had people to employ, and a paychecks and payroll to meet every month. So Leo was thinking about this in commercial terms, and so in order to come out with the best product, he had to come up with the best design in his mind. So that first prototype didn't make it. He worked on a second prototype, which was still a one pickup guitar, and that's probably in the fall of 1949. And that culminated in the introduction in April of 1950 of that first black pickguard, and also the black with white pickguard Esquires that are shown in that 1950 catalog.
But he made these guitars for the country players. He was a big country music fan.
In Los Angeles, we're not that far from Bakersfield, and that was, the California home of country music. Actually, Leo, in the beginning, and some of his people like Freddie Tavares, they would find these musicians and they would ask them, they'd put their ear to the ground and they'd say, what can we do? What can we build for you? What would make this guitar better? And they really were trying to build something that was simple, efficient, and that would work.
Well, it's a very simple guitar, very very basic. I mean, it was built as a disposable guitar, really, because when the frets wore out, you'd take the neck off and you buy another neck. That was the idea. So it just ended up being something far more than it was designed to be, you know. As well, I guess a lot of guitars were like that, like the Les Paul, for instance. But the Tele is, you know, I'm sure Leo Fender wouldn't have dreamt what would have happened to that guitar.
I think he would have been really surprised that it became the icon that it has. You know what I mean?
But it was quite a good marketing plan, was that? You throw your neck away and go buy another one.
Right, the Esquire was sort of an early, I believe, if my chronology is right, an earlier version of the Tele. It was sort of a development stage. But I mean, actually, I mean, there's not a lot about, and I've had one or two. I mean, you can almost feel inside it like Leo is saying, it's not quite right yet. It's, you know, one more step, you know, and this is it. I mean, you can drop this and knock people on the head with it. I mean, look at it. It's pretty beat up like me.
Of course, Leo's mind's always thinking, and he comes up with this idea, well, maybe it should have another pickup. So that set him back another couple of months working on the tooling for that. And by June, he had the pickup designed. And of course, the pickup's entirely different than the lead pickup. It has this chrome cover over it, gives it a softer sound. The cover has a tendency to cut the overtones. So if you go for a harmonic on just lead pickup, it's there. The first harmonic's there, but the second harmonic's not, or not as strong at least. Oops, it is there, but it's not as loud as the lead pickup. And you can see as you go higher on the harmonics, they fade out. That's what makes it sound bassy. Gives it the jazzy sound.
Well, I started with an Esquire. And the way I've always looked at an Esquire is the difference in an Esquire and a Tele is an Esquire had one pickup and a Tele had two.
Leo thought the idea of having a regal name was good, something that sounded like royalty of guitar, so the Esquire was the name they came up with that fit that bill. And Esquire actually was the magazine, and there were a couple of other products that had Esquire, but nobody had complained about that name. When they went to go from a one pickup model to a two pickup model, they retained that Esquire name. But the problem was all the orders that they'd taken for the guitar from the salesmen that were out in the field had been for a single pickup Esquire, because that was what the product that was featured in the 1950 catalog was a single pickup guitar. So having the double pickup guitar named the same thing didn't really make a lot of sense because it was more expensive. The orders were for the lower price guitar, so they were kind of in a quandary. The way they got out of the quandary, of course, was to change the name of the guitar from the Esquire to the Broadcaster for the double pickup guitar, and then retain that Esquire name for the single pickup guitar. So it wasn't just one Fender guitar like Leo had envisioned originally. It was two guitars, a single pickup model and a double pickup model. They ran an ad in Musical Merchandise Review, a full-page insert ad in 1951 in January. And the Fred Gretsch company was obviously reading the trade magazines, and they picked up on it right away. That Fender had introduced a Broadcaster model guitar, and they had the Gretsch company, that is, had a trademark registered for the Broadcaster name used in drum sets, and they used it for some other things. I think there was a Broadcaster banjo as well. I'm not sure about that. In any event, they sent a nice telegram, friendly telegram, informing Don Randall and the crew at Radio Television Equipment Company that they couldn't use the name and that they'd have to switch. So Randall, had the lawyers look at it, but he agreed, that they had to figure out what they were going to call the guitar. So somewhere around February 20th or 21st, the telegram is actually dated in February. They started working on the idea for a new guitar name, and they came up with Telecaster, which was, the logical extension for Broadcaster to Telecaster. That was the age of television, and that's where they were at.
I had the idea of naming these things such a way that they kind of fell in line with each other, whether it was the Telecaster, the Stratocaster, or whatever it might have been. We were still more in the country business at that time, but the rock and roll was coming on. And it wasn't long after that rock and roll was taking hold.
Well, Leo was a remarkable person. I had the opportunity to meet with him on a number of occasions. Very down to earth. You would never know that he was the head of this sort of global phenomenon that was Fender guitars. He was almost a recluse. He was happiest in his lab, shunned the spotlight, famously. I remember he had a styrofoam coffee cup with a piece of tape on it that had the word Leo in ballpoint pen. He had a sheet steel work table and piles of components and parts and a concrete floor. That was the atmosphere he was happiest in, designing guitars, working on a new amp, working on a new pickup.
Well, he wasn't an out front man at all. He stayed in the factory and as far back in the factory as he could get most of the time, and not wasted, but spent most all of his time fiddling with the various instruments in front of a test bench that he had that he used. He was a very interesting guy, though. He didn't have any really close friends, I don't think. Even his wife, I don't think, was very close to him.
He always felt that the next guitar was going to be the best guitar. He thought the Strat would make the Tele obsolete.
He certainly wasn't a genius in any way. The things that happened because of the progress that was made along the line. The first guitars he made were almost unusable. But he just kept fiddling around with it and kept going, and eventually they turned out pretty well. And he had some help along the sides too. Freddie Tavares and other guys that worked there were very instrumental in these things.
I think Freddie Tavares was absolutely essential to the success of Fender, in that because Mr. Fender himself did not play the instrument, which I think in some ways was an advantage because it freed him from convention when it came to designing them. He did need to communicate to guitar players, which he did routinely. Freddie, who was a wonderful musician and an engineer, and who was a draftsman, and who could translate these ideas into workable products and communicate with musicians and translate their feedback in a way that Mr. Fender would understand, provided a key role.
You know, Leo was a funny guy in some ways, but he was really particular in that he believed that progress was progress, and that if you build an improvement into a guitar, it's going to make the whole guitar better. So if you improve the bridge, if you add 6 pieces to it, or if you improve the volume controls somehow, you improve the way the nut works, the way the tuners work, that all of that would add up to a better guitar. But that's really not the case, necessarily. Because these guitars, they're not perfect, you gotta fight them. They don't stay in tune perfectly, they don't wear over time perfectly. So Leo thought that, actually this is ironic, but he thought that these guitars were inferior to his newer guitars. He thought that he'd improved the G&L guitar especially to the point where it would outdo one of these. So I don't think Leo, because he wasn't a guitar player, didn't appreciate the personal aspect of the guitar and what it really needs to be and the way musicians look at them.
But Leo's idea was a brainstorm, really. On top of that, the guitars themselves, Stratocaster included. I mean, I happen to play Tele more than I love the Strat, but it's like, you know, it's almost above my pocket. I mean, it's more versatile. The Telecaster has a certain indefinable sound, touch, feel. And what I also loved about it was that it's the sturdiest thing in the world. I mean, you can whack your way out of bar fights with this thing and still it'll play, you know. It was a journeyman's guitar. It was made for the road. It was made to do the business. And it was no fancy, nothing, but it was the machine, you know. I mean, you couldn't go wrong.
Well, just because it works good, I mean, I heard it said you can fight your way out of a bar with one of them if you have to, you know what I mean? I never had to do that. I hope I never do. But just something about the simplicity of it is what makes it work, you know, with especially with the Esquire. One pickup, and that's all you got, and you better be able to make it work, you know what I mean? Plug it in an old tweed amp and go to town.
You can treat it like a farm animal and it'll still stay in tune.
This guitar never needs anything. I throw it on airplanes, I throw it in luggage, I throw it in buses, in my car, it falls in the house, and nothing ever happens to this guitar. It's completely indestructible.
It's like a Volkswagen Beetle, I suppose. It just works.
This is just a workhorse. You know, the neat thing about it too is you try to play, like when I saw Jeff Beck and the Yardbirds do Heart Full of Soul and Train Kept a Rollin' and Still I'm Sad, and he was doing all the tone control stuff, and I just thought that was brilliant how you could get so many different sounds out of it just using one type of guitar and not, you know, having a bunch of switches and everything all over the place. You know, you just use what you had on the guitar, not the foot pedals and all this stuff. But Jeff did use an overdrive, you know.
Once you go through a pedal, you don't do anything at all. Just your level, and that's it. I've never seen anybody really vary the tone much on their guitars. It's all done with presets and stuff like that. And to me, it's losing the beauty of what Fender built into the guitar in the first place. I didn't even have a guitar when I joined the Yardbirds. I sold the Strat that I bought. And I had to borrow somewhere. I think with Eric's Telecaster, with a red Telecaster. And I think I used that for the first couple of 3 weeks. And then I went to see the Walker Brothers rehearsing in London. And it was amazing. I mean, they were a really good, polished act. And I noticed that John had a Esquire that had been really had, you know. And I thought it'd be about 40 quid. And he charged me 75 quid for it, which is only about 20 quid less than what they were before, you know, he butchered it. And then I found, to my delight, they were on tour, so I managed to get it, you know, during that tour. 65, I think it's 66. And then I had that as long as till 74 when I was doing the Blow by Blow album. And then along comes Seymour Duncan with a nice Tele, ash body Tele, with humbuckers on it, which played great, sounded great. And he walked off with my Yardbird guitar, which wasn't until he'd gone that I realised what I'd let him have. So I'll have it back if you don't mind, mister.
He owned the guitar for quite a few years, or it's pretty much donated to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now that's where the guitar rests now. This guitar was inspected by one of the senior master builders, John English, the great late John English, Mike Eldred, and George Blanda, and Seymour Duncan. They flew out to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and met with Seymour out there, and they were kind enough to be able to pull the guitar out of the case that they had it there in, and were able to take it into a back room and completely inspect the guitar, take it completely apart, take all the measurements, the readings, the paint samples, and everything off of this guitar, and it's full. Nobody's been able to do that before, except for us. So they brought that back, and that was going to be a project that John English was going to work on. But he was so backed up with orders and stuff going on. Mike Eldred came to me and asked me if I'd be interested in getting involved in this, and I jumped at the fact of doing it because Jeff's one of my heroes. Again, you know, like all these tributes that come out there just so happen to be my heroes. But this is one of the ones that I was really looking forward to getting involved in, and they asked me if I could do a prototype of the guitar, and I said, sure. So they turned me on to all the pieces and footage of the guitar and pretty much all the information I had to work with. I took it home and examined it really good on my DVD thing at home. Checked out the grains of the wood and everything. Obviously we couldn't line up the grains of the guitar exactly, but we did our best to try to find two pieces of wood that would look really good with that, and I came up with the prototype with it, with everything, you know, down to the back, you know, the wear on the back, the contours, the arm contours, just pretty much everything exactly the way that it looked. We sent that prototype to Jeff Beck for approval. That guitar never came back because he loved it so much. It's just like, you know, this. I heard that he opened up the case and he thought it was the original one, that it came back to him, and that was a pretty funny story because it's like I tried my hardest to make it look as close as I could, and that's, needless to say, that's his guitar now. He loves it so much and plays it on occasion, and it was that pretty much told me right there that this is going to be a home run with this guitar here. So that's how it evolved, and you know, it was a pretty neat guitar. You can see the amount of wear going on the fretboard edge right there, and you know, it had kind of a weird wear pattern on the back, and that's, you know, he played a lot with his thumb over the top, so that, you know, came to be with all the wear on the sides right there. This is just kind of weird how it has that little sea serpent type look, but that's how his looked. All the scratches and everything, you can see all the dings on the sides were all pretty much copied to the T. One of the things that I like to do was the actual wear on the pickguard itself. We pretty much copied that one-to-one off of a picture that I had of it, and I blew it up to the same size and made a pattern for that to do that. And as well as, you know, the aging of the bridge and the saddles and everything, and the pickup. I took the readings off the pickup and had Abigail wind a pickup for me. We tested a few different ones and got a couple really good sounding pickups, and that's the one that we went with, that we sent to Jeff as well, and he loved it.
Why anybody would want to pay big bucks for a guitar with damage to it, I don't know. But, you know, they don't take long to put that kind of damage on if you're a hard player, you know.
That baffles me. I mean, the few times when I have, in my life, when I have got a new guitar, I like a nice shiny one. You know. Norman's got a, the bass centre are making basses, copying his old jazz. And they've got all the cracks and the hole he's dug with his thumb, right? And you can buy one of them, man, with a thumb hole in it and everything.
I know that there's two different aspects of guitar playing. That there's one bunch who think about is the way you look and carry something and sling it about, you know, which is like you cowboys, you know, and it's all right, you know, you can have fun doing that, but it wouldn't really matter what guitar playing. But if you're really into guitars, and especially electric guitars, you know, obviously, somewhere you're going to gravitate towards a Fender. You know, and to the Telecaster, you're almost in a club with that thing of, you know, what you can do with it and how it will sound, and it's almost like a secret society in a way.
In 1953-54, Leo thought the Telecaster would be obsolete. He said that many times. The Telecaster would be obsolete by the Stratocaster.
He was proud of his product. He used to tell us that his guitar was the Cadillac.
What keeps me on track is just thinking, you know, the basic, what would Leo do? And what Leo would do would be ask guitar players what they want. What keeps me up nights about it is how do I keep this 60-year-old brand, you know, relevant to a group of young players that are coming up that in the act of defining themselves, they often dismantle what their dad thought was cool. But thank goodness if your dad is James Burton or Jimi Hendrix or something, then it's okay. But I take that accountability as a responsibility and a commitment, and I'm just incredibly lucky to have this job. It's a dream come true. But we really haven't wandered that far from what Leo set up. He was looking to make a guitar that was serviceable, that didn't require a ridiculous level of artisan, a craftsmanship that would make it unaffordable. And so I think really from a manufacturing or production standpoint, it's really not that different. But having seen as many Telecasters as I have over the years, I think sometimes there's a little bit of misconception about how special they were back in the day. What we focus on now is probably a more consistent product as far as neck pockets, the fit and finish that players have told us mean a lot to them. And I think that's a big part of it. Certainly the machinery and the labor force, a lot of the people are the same, to be frank. We have people that have worked there since the mid-50s that are still making the instruments. We have a lot of this original presses and things like that. The instrument itself, it's so simple that really, I mean, how much could you change it? But there is a huge misconception with a lot of people that in this era of production for global consumption, that the Fender factory takes a big piece of alder or ash in one side of it, a big log, and out comes a shiny Telecaster. But it's still skilled hands, eyes, ears. We're still hand producing these instruments. They're not all exactly the same. The conversation where somebody's sanding the neck on one and the guy next to him says, "Hey, what are you doing for lunch?" And a couple extra passes on the sander and the neck's going to feel just a little bit different. So I think we aim for consistency, but the products are still made by a lot of the same people on a lot of the same machinery with the same passion and desire to make the best possible guitar. There certainly is a certain mystique and appreciation and value of the older instruments, and you get the whole pre-CBS and all those conversations. The fact is, if you look at enough of those instruments, you'll see huge variety. 52 Teles that you could really, put 3 heavy picks in the neck pocket and things like that.
I think in the early days when the girls were winding pickups by hand, you'd get them, they'd be winding, they'd be talking about what happened last night, and some occasionally you might get a little bit more of a wind on something. It would be more of an individual sound. And my old 54 Telecaster's got a pickup on the back like a hamburger because it must have been a good story. And there's a lot of winding going on. He did what?
I guess it could happen, yeah. I don't remember it happening to me. What Leo used to say was that some of the best pickups we did was when we were asleep, because it's really easy to doze off here.
Some people want to believe myth and legend. This wasn't a myth and legend instrument, it was a factory-made instrument with cheap labour, and they were turned out quick because they wanted to get this product or instrument onto the market. And they wanted to sell as many as they could because they wanted everybody to play Fender guitars. But you can still buy a great Fender guitar today. There are a lot of people who would like to believe that the old ones all were wonderful and all sounded amazing. Some of them sounded amazing and some of them were wonderful. And that's what creates the myth. Some of them were mediocre, but not all of them. But that's like everything. You get great ones, not so great ones.
Leo thought the vintage guitar stuff was crazy. Very simple. It was crazy. But then I would show him guitars like this, And he'd look at it and go, well, yeah, it is pretty good, isn't it? And he would use this guitar. He used it several times. As a matter of fact, he told me he thought this was the best Telecaster that he'd ever heard. He told me that 2 or 3 times. I used to take it and we'd sit it down on the bench at G&L, and he would plug this one in and plug in one of the G&Ls, and they'd be side by side on the table. And he'd strum them, and he'd go, yeah, it does sound pretty good, but mine sounds better.
I played with the band, and I had some fellows that played with me, a guy named Bobby Caldwell, and we realized that, you know, some of the older guitars just seemed to be so much, you know, better. They were made with superior woods, and they just seemed to play better and sounded better. I kind of got into it in the late 60s, and that was sort of the beginning of the quality starting to go a little bit downhill from the 50s and the early 60s, and then there was sort of a noticeable difference in the late 60s. By the time it got to the early 70s, what was happening is, you know, whether to cut costs or, you know, or just that demand was so high, they would end up, you know, just employing more people at these factories, you know, using lesser quality woods, and they, you know, just everything just had to be mass produced quickly. I mean, I think the Beatles probably were really responsible for a lot of that, because all of a sudden everybody wanted to play guitar, and, you know, these people were probably, the manufacturers were probably pulling people off the street and saying, we need somebody, and, you know, and they were hiring these folks, and just the quality just seemed to go down. And I'd say like late 70s, early 80s might have been the low point. And people were paying a lot more money for the vintage guitars. And, you know, it was funny, people thought I was out of my mind because I was paying much more for vintage guitars than I would for new guitars. I'd walk into pawn shops and music stores and buy their vintage guitars, and they probably thought I was the biggest sucker in the world because I was coming in and I was buying these things that they really didn't care about. But there was an inside group of people that were really in search of these things.
Basically, the black, you know, or Telecaster, which is older than 54, has unique sound of it, or its own sound. Maybe the combination of the body and the neck. And generally, the older guitars has better sound than today's guitar because of that, you know, selected wood. And years by, it's dried up, and, you know, and of course, it's a manufacturer's guitar. There might be some guitars, not only electric, even with the Martin Gibson flat tops. I'm sure there's several guitars, but not right, combination-wise, you know. So these guitars might be warped, you know, or broken and stashed away, maybe. So what you're looking at today is real, you know, survivors of the 50 years or so, you know. So you're lucky to, you know, see them today and choose, you know. So I wish it would be played, and Leo must have felt the same way, you know. It's a $200 guitar, you know, or $150 guitar. No, today's $50, $60, $100,000, you know. That's way too much.
This guitar here is a 1953 Blackguard Telecaster. This is highly sought after, and this is one of the most amazing examples I've ever seen of this guitar. The earliest Telecasters have this more butterscotch color, a little more yellow. They have this black pickguard, a bakelite, very early form of plastic, I guess you would call it. And the earliest ones, these serial numbers were on this bridge plate over here. Also has the brass bridge pieces here, very early style. Has the rounder knobs than the later ones. And also, again, has this round string retainer. And these have the flat pole pickup here. They're just amazing sounding pickups. And as the guitars progressed and they started mass producing them, they seem to thin out. You know, they don't sound quite as warm and as fat. And it's just undescribable what it is that causes this particular sound with these guitars. I don't know how you can put it into words, but it's, the people that play these recognize it right away. And the reissues are terrific guitars, but they don't sound like this. This guitar, based on its condition and its originality, would probably bring $80,000 to $85,000. It has its original fitted case, it's museum quality. There's very few in this particular condition. Now, this guitar new was a couple $100, and nobody ever thought these guitars would amount to this kind of money, but the demand is so high, and there's so few of these that are in this kind of condition because people bought these as working instruments, and they bought them to play, and you know, they were only a couple $100. People didn't always take care of them, so it's very difficult to find ones in this particular kind of condition.
Well, I know they're selling for up in there, but I don't know why. I don't understand it.
Well, this is a broadcaster, 1950 broadcaster, which is the first group of Telecasters that were made before Leo got worried about getting sued by Gretsch for the name broadcaster. So this is one of the first 500 electric guitars, solid body electric guitars ever made, and it's in mint condition. I mean, this is the way it would have looked in 1950 if you went into a guitar store. Some collector had it, and I bought it from him and have had it ever since and won't part with it, but it's an amazing sounding and an amazing playing guitar. It's got a very thin neck, which I like. Even though my hands are big, I like small necks. It's not a very fat neck. And it just sounds amazing, and it looks, I mean, I hope you can get that. It just looks amazing. You know, if it was a woman, I'd marry it.
So I have quite several, and they're all right around from the age of 1953, 54, 56, maybe. Nearly all of them about that age. And so this one I think is called Micawber. And we have a Maria somewhere. For some reason, the names always start with an M. Sorry, Leo, but
there's something about these old instruments, whether it's the alloys they used in wiring the pickups, the wood that was used, the finish. You know, I mean, now there's such a demand for wood that you can't be that select. You can't meet that demand with the thousands and thousands of orders that are coming through. So they have to, take whatever they can get. And there is something about the sound and the mojo of these old guitars that's just hard to duplicate. And I don't want to claim that I know what it is, because I don't, but I know it exists.
This is a 54 Telecaster. This is Richard Smith's guitar, and it's a wonderful, even sounding guitar. The neck pickup on this one has a nice bell-like sound to it. The bottom strings are really even. Both pickups. The bridge. better than that.
Well, this is a 52 that I got from a guy who had it underneath his bed for a long time, and it's just got a bit of weather checking on it, but it pretty well is also in mint condition. Amazing sounding, an amazing sounding guitar as well. Sometimes if we play locally, I'll take this out and play it live because it sounds so good. But like I said, I'm just in love with them.
In the 50s and 60s, where there weren't a lot of aftermarket products, then you put together your guitar with the products that were available. If your pickup stopped working, you need a new pickup. And people didn't have 8 or 10 guitars. They had 1, maybe 2. So you repaired the guitar you got, and that's why now a totally original, untouched, soldered instrument would be more valuable than one that had a new pickup or new parts. But it might not be as good a guitar. Normally, if a guitar's well beaten and used, it's a sign of a good guitar. If you get a really mint one that's been under the bed, maybe it wasn't a great guitar to start with, and that's why it's been under the bed.
This is a 51 Telecaster, and it's a beautiful thing. Say no more, please. This one, this particular one, has a lot more of a Jimmy Bryant tone to the neck pickup than the 54 I was playing just a minute ago. This has more of a bell-like character to it. I guess you can hear the difference yourself. Even the bass notes have that growl thing to them, and that's the neck pickup by itself.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Ford truck. You know, it's definitely there for you. It's dependable. You can play it in Minnesota in the freezing weather, and then, drive to Las Vegas and play and maybe tweak the truss rod a little bit. I think it's got that reputation. I know Bill Schultz never really enjoyed that. He always, he just was never satisfied with that. That's why you'll see things like the Mayan Telecaster and these, $40,000, $50,000 guitars that they make in the custom shop, because it can be both a piece of art and a highly desirable collectible instrument. But at the end of the day, it's an instrument to create music that influences and changes contemporary music, and it is a solid workhorse. It's dependable, and that's part of the Fender brand. I think the Telecaster represents it so purely, that brand promise from Fender. If you're a professional and you need a professional instrument, something to depend on, certainly a Telecaster with its simplicity, its purity, and just the versatility of tones and expressions that can come from it, it certainly has to be considered the working man's guitar.
I always say Telecaster is the guitar player's guitar.
And it still looks great. I mean, there's a few things you can think back of 60 years ago that are still valid to this day, almost arguably as valid as they were then as they are now, or perhaps even more so than, a Telecaster. It's kind of scary, to be honest with you. But I'm glad they made it.
It was just something that we did right in America. I can't say that for many of our cars. I can't say that for many of our other products, but we did this right.
Well, the John 5 Tele has, we start off with a standard Tele body that's double bound, and then we put a humbucking pickup in the bridge position with a, I believe this is a twisted Tele. No pickup selector, and we have the custom 3 per side headstock that he prefers and uses with the straight pull. You notice that there's hardly any pull, any angle, downward angle going from the nut to the fret, through the frets onto the tuners. Other than that, it's just a standard. It's not even tuned down. He tunes down a bit, I think. Pickup selector switch up here. Master volume, master tone.
I put a Bigsby on and made the headstock a little different because I like to do behind the nut bends. You can play it, any kind of music on it. What I like to do sometimes is, which is a cool trick, is hit a harmonic. And one is going down and one is going up. So when I hit this and I bend this up, the harmonic, the lower one, is going down. So you'll hear one going up and one going down. Which is a really cool trick. And then, of course, when you want to get those high pings out, that kind of cool stuff. So, yeah, it's, you can use it in heavy rock or country, any of those styles. It is too amazing, of a guitar to be pigeonholed to just one type of music. I've played, with Katie Lang to Rob Zombie to Marilyn Manson to, everybody under the sun. And I've always used a Telecaster, and I love history of the Fender company and Telecaster. So I always looked into the old Tele players. I loved Jimmy Bryant, and I loved Speedy West, and I loved, Chet Atkins and Roy Clark and these different kind of players, but I wanted to incorporate it in my style so I wouldn't be just another guy playing crazy rock guitar. I wanted to incorporate this kind of style in my playing, like, if I'm playing a that's something you would hear in a country song, but it also works in a rock thing if you're playing fast or something like that. You can use that in rock as well, and that's what I try to do, is just mix it up a little bit. And even when I'm doing a country session, but it works in a certain kind of country thing. If you're really playing fast country stuff and you do something like that, it works. So I like to mix it up a little bit, and I think that's why, sometimes kids are influenced because it's something different that you don't see every day in rock guitar. If I play some country licks, or in country if I play some rock licks like that, because there's been many a country player that have said, "Oh, how do you do that?" They don't, but a lot of rock guys know that, but a lot of country guys don't. And then the rock guys go, "How do you do that?" That kind of stuff. So it kind of evens itself out in some weird way. always say, you know, if there was anybody I wanted to meet, it was Leo Fender, and I would have shook his hand and looked him in the eye and, you know, said, "You're a genius."
As a sound, as a reliable working man, musician's piece of work, Leo came up with the gem at the beginning.
I think back in the 50s that Leo probably made two of the best guitars around, and that would be the Telecaster and the Stratocaster.
And for me, I think he had it right from the very beginning. I love the Telecaster. I have a lot of different guitars, but this one here, this is one I used on my Where Blue Begins recording, and this one here is actually was a Fender Squire that I acquired, and I actually did a little modification to it, like this rear pickup here. This is the original pickup, but there's also a Seymour Duncan humbucker that I installed in the front, and it has this push-pull pod here. And then also on the back, I have these spurt cell locking tuners, which helps. And I've always loved the rosewood neck. And there's a thin, you know, this is a thin neck, Fender neck. And because you can see I got big palms, but my fingers are really tiny. You know, I'm actually trained as an electrician. My parents weren't too thrilled about me going into the music business. I mean, I was an electrician before I started doing this. And they weren't thrilled the day I told them I'm quitting and I'm just going to do this, you know, with no money. I don't know what's going to happen. If I wait on the money to have enough money to do it, I'll never get started. So I just quit. And they weren't thrilled about it. Yeah, I set up my own guitars. I wired them, you know. I can wire your house.
Telecaster really got into me. I mean, I was playing all kinds of, if you see early pictures, I mean, throughout the early 60s and stuff, I'm playing Gibsons, Epiphones, all kinds, you know, and sometimes a Fender, a Strat here and there, but for me the point came when actually I started to go into different tunings, and I went to 5-string tuning. You know, there's stuff had been different. These tunings come from old blues cats and an incredible sound acoustically. And I always wondered if it would translate electrically. If you're playing 5-string, you're basically in an open chord. You can't go wrong, you know. Jingle bells, you know what I mean? But it's what you do with it and finding minor chords. There's all kinds of... I got into the 5-string mainly because I was working a lot and I found that I wasn't learning much. You know, I was just like rehashing what I was doing. And in a way, to take that bottom string off and tune it differently, like you said, start again. And which was a challenge. But then I always thought, Leo set me a trap here. Yeah. Because if I can get the 5-string and to work with the way there's a certain touch you can get with a Telecaster. With it all rings straight through. Not one string is like louder than the other. There's no screwing about, you know. And it's like, boom, it's a solid piece of work. And once you put it in and plugged it in, you know, the player knows what's going to come out. You know, I mean, it depends what you're playing, whether anybody else likes it, but there's a certain confidence that you got from playing these, because it's kind of you knew exactly where you were at with it. It didn't play around with you one day or another, or you know, too many and or the high tech. You know, I mean, this will put you to the test as a player. Mm-hmm.
I went to a show, and I had the opportunity to see Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and John Lee Hooker, and that was the end. I fell in love with the blues, and that was like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do here.
To me, probably the first time growing up and listening, probably James Burton. It was when you heard, that's the Telecaster. I mean, that is the apex of the Telecaster sound, is that dry, sly, lovely, thick rhythm. And that was the first time, just growing up and starting to want to be a guitar player, James Burton said Telecaster to me, you know. I mean, as I say, I never bought a Ricky Nelson record. I went out and bought James Burton records, you know. It just how it happened that Ricky Nelson was singing in front, you know, but it was, to me, peripheral. It was that sound, Hello Mary Lou, and that, and this man can milk that machine like nobody else, you know.
You know, when you're starting out, you're young, and you don't know where your career's going to go. All you know is you're doing what you love, and you're playing the instrument you love. And I've always loved tone. Tone to me was whatever song I'm playing, or whoever the artist might be, or whatever instrumental I'm playing. To me, the tone had to match what you were doing. You know, if you play a blues tune or something, you want to tone down your treble a little bit and get more of a mid-range, more of a bassier tone, where you could, it just to kind of change, go from one extreme to the other when you play country music, rhythm and blues, or gospel, or whatever it might be. A lot of rockabilly back in those days. I've always wanted to do a 3 pickup Tele, and that's what I did with my signature. So we did 3 pickups, which these are the noiseless pickups, and I experimented with different ones, the way to wind them, everything. And I like the little short bridge, American Standard bridge. It's very small, and the 6-piece bridge. I love the neck. It's a satin neck that I actually copied from my Pink Paisley. And it has a 5-way switch, and it also has a push button here on the volume control that gives you a little boost on your out-of-phase positions. So, and it's a wonderful playing guitar, and it sounds wonderful.
I often wonder how James Burton came to play a Tele, and I think I asked him once, and he said he just walked into a music store with his mum, and I guess he was like 13 or 14 or whatever, and he said, "Oh, I like the look of that one, I want that one."
And I saw this blonde Telecaster hanging in the window, and I just stood there and just stared at it. I mean, it was incredible.
I mean, that was kind of a groundbreaking move there, because it was, he's one of the masters of the Tele,
Well, I guess I created my own style when I started playing, and being able to play with so many different artists, it's very important that you can separate that. You can't play the same sound, the same tone on everyone's records, So you got to separate that. So you kind of got to go with the flow. You got to hear the difference in the voice, the vocal, or the background music, and you got to fit into that. So you got to make this work for you, as a musician. So to me, that's very important, that you can separate the tone. When you go do a Beach Boy recording session, and you go from there to say a Buck Owens or Ray Charles, it's different, So you got to match your sound and your tone to that, But I always kept my style. It was always me. When you heard me on a solo, you could tell it was me, because I always kept that touch and that, the energy into playing my solos, and but make it work for the song and for the artist.
Essentially, when you buy a record, you buy the artist, but if it does have something special, it's usually in the guitar section. So, for me, it's a great pleasure to hand you the Fender Arbiter Hall of Fame Award. I didn't realize it was the inaugural one. It's the first one. James and I couldn't think of anybody who deserves it more. Thanks for all the inspiration.
Elvis loves guitar, and him and I always had really good contact on stage, great communication. And if I would play a hot lick or something, or if I'd, do something that, he'd look around and, yeah, baby, yeah. He loved it, and I couldn't do enough of that, he just wanted more of that.
you know, I was listening to James Burton, and I don't know if I'd ever seen a picture of him, but I guess I must have done, because I knew somehow that he played a Telecaster, and Telecasters came in about 1961, you know, and they were pretty cheap. They were like £120 or something, 112, something like that. But I didn't get one immediately. I was still playing the Gibson, you know, and then I think it was like 62 or 63. I happened to be in Selma's, the shop in Charing Cross Road, and they had a second-hand one in there for like £52, and it was a little beaten up, you know, but it wasn't that old really, because they had a rosewood fingerboard, which they didn't start making until like '59, I think. So it was only like 2 or 3 years old, but it was a little beaten up. But anyway, I bought this guitar and thought, wow, this is great. It just sounded so alive and electric, you know. And didn't have the fat sound that the Gibson had, but it just had such a character, you know. And really, you know, the Tele and Tele similar guitars have been my sound ever since, really. I mean, my style is, you know, really an amalgam of all of the influences I've had, you know. You know, it started out with the kind of trying to play fingerstyle like Scotty Moore and Chet Atkins, but I really couldn't get on with a thumb pick. I didn't like it at all, you know, so I figured out a way of using a flat pick and my fingers, you know. And I don't remember seeing anybody doing that at the time, but I know there were people playing that way, and then of course I learned that James Burton played that way, and Glenn Campbell, who was a really hot session player in the 60s, he played the same way with flat pick and fingers. And of course a lot of guys play like that now, you know, but you know, when I started playing, there wasn't really anybody to go and see, you know. You know, there were the jazz players. You know, I count like Hank Marvin as one of my contemporaries, really. You know, he's a couple of years older than me, but you know, I was kind of started out around the same time. Big Jim Sullivan, of course, was you know, was really a good player at that time, and still is, of course. You know, so but apart from these guys, nobody that really impressed me until the Americans came over. You know, and Eddie Cochran came over, and he said, "Wow, this is cool," you know. And of course, he spread the word on how to buy a set of strings. You know, getting real slinky strings. You know, buying a set of strings and buying a really light banjo string or an extra first string. Put that on the top, then put the first string where the second string and the second string where the third string is. So you get a really light set of strings, and you just throw away the bottom string. You wouldn't need that. It was an expensive way of doing it, but you couldn't buy rock and roll strings in those days, you know. And it was guys like Eddie Cochran that kind of spread the word to us, you know, poor guys over here, you know. So, but it was a learning process, and things were happening really fast, you know.
Well, around about the time I was still working in a panel shop and you know, doing cars and stuff. All the time I was in there, I was thinking about what records I was going to buy at the end of the week, and you had to make a pretty serious choice because you didn't have that much money to spend. So that narrowed the field down to the best, and that was like Booker T and the MGs.
And I grew up on soul, and all I was aware of was Steve Cropper, and the little sort of offbeat rhythms, and how he said so much by playing so little when he played, and that's the only guitar playing I was at all aware of, and I loved it, and I loved all those songs, and I loved what he brought to them.
You know, most of the stuff that we did back in the 60s, at least the stuff that our names are on that we wrote, produced, and played on, was all Fender Telecaster. I mean, I kind of retired the Esquire. That was what was on Green Onions, and it was on a couple other things. But I got into Telecasters. I personally owned a couple of them. And what I started doing when we'd go on the road, especially with Otis, like we did a tour over here in 1967, we didn't have guitar techs in those days. Lord, we couldn't afford ourselves, let alone a guitar tech. And a lot of that stuff with Otis, because Otis was a very limited guitar player, and he tuned to a chord. What they referred to in the old days, where it came from, I have no idea, is Vasapoo. But it was an E chord open, you know, and you got an E chord. And so a lot of that stuff like, I've been loving you too long, can't stop now. I played it, which would be minor and tuned to standard. And so I carried 2 Telecasters with me. One of them was tuned to a chord and the other one was tuned standard. And so when Otis came out, I'd pick up the one that was tuned to open tuning. And most of the songs, when I look back, things like Knock on Wood and The Midnight Hour, 6, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, those songs were all written on a Telecaster unplugged, just acoustically in a room, very quiet. If you got loud in a hotel room, whether it was a Holiday Inn or whatever it was, you'd get thrown out. I remember I was riding with Mac Rice one night. Man, he's stomping, and all of a sudden we hear beating on the door, and the manager come and said, "If you boys don't hold it down, I'm going to have to throw you out of here," you know, one of those deals. And he was just stomping that foot, you know, almost as loud as the guitar was going. So I think that's probably the thing that inspired me more than anything, is the fact that it just sounded so good acoustically. And that's sort of the way I test a guitar. Whether it's a vintage or what year it was, if I pick it up, I want to hear it acoustically. If it sounds good acoustically, you know pretty much that it's going to sound good when you plug it up, unless you got a bad amp. There's no way I could describe to you the energy, the level of energy and the fun I had sitting up all night long in a hotel room writing with Otis Redding. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. You know, that's like sitting next to the Pope and talking to him all night long, you know. It's just everything that came out of his mouth was just great, you know. And so I was the only guy besides him in the room, and I could just pick and choose. It was like a gourmet of soul and feeling, and I just would pick up on something he'd say, and here we'd go. One of the best examples of that was he was humming me a horn line, and he said on a song, he said, "Tomorrow I want fa 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 fa. I want the horns to go fa 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 fa," you know. And that's F-A, fa. That was his sound for a saxophone. And I went, wow. And he was like real energetic and all that. Fa, 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 fa. And he goes, "What are you doing?" Fa, 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 fa. And I just wrote about him. I've been singing these sad songs, all I know. You know. When I wrote with Otis, lyrically I wrote about Otis. Usually the music came first. I'd start a groove. That's it, that's it. Sometimes we'd go in the studio and he wouldn't even have the lyrics finished. And, you know, we'd kind of ad-lib. Dock of the Bay, he started whistling instead of doing the ad-lib, which turned out great, you know, it made the record. But he just forgot what he was going to do. And we always kind of waited for what Otis was going to do in the end of a song, because he'd start creating a whole brand new record. You know, it was amazing. He used to do that. But, and that was some fond memories. And Eddie Floyd, how many hours have we spent in a hotel room writing songs, you know? It just doesn't get any better than that. I miss those times. We could still do it, but what would we do with it, you know? We had the machine then. We knew what we were going to do. We were there for a purpose. We were there to make hit records, to get people to dance, to get them excited about music and stuff. And we knew we could go in the next morning and cut it. And that's what we did. We'd write it the night before, cut it the next day. You can write a song now and it might not get cut for 2 or 3 years. It's just, time has just gone berserk. I don't know what's going on with all that. My biggest thrill in my whole life ever is to hear something that I played on the radio. I went, yeah, that's what it's all about.
was actually born like it, so it's never been like a major kind of challenge really, because obviously I've never known any difference, you know. So it's I can imagine that it'd be a lot easier if I did have a hand, but it's all comes from passion and intention really. That I just really had a burning desire to play from a very young age. You know, I was listening to blues from a young age. My parents always put B.B. King on. B.B. King, you know, it's just so. Just love B.B. King. It's so simple, you know. No, I don't think I would have been a better player if I had two hands, no. I think part of the passion to play is to overcome your physicality, you know. That's part of the passion, you know. So, yeah, I was told from a young age that I'd never be able to play. So it kind of was setting me a challenge, you know, like, because I loved guitar so much, and that was quite a blow to me, you know. I was lumbered with the trumpet at school, you know. You can play that with one hand or maybe some keyboard lines, and it was like, but yeah, I had a lot of people at school telling me that wouldn't be possible. You can't play guitar with one arm, you know. That's just out of the question, you know. You need to pick something else. So yeah, and then one day one of the teachers encouraged me in one of the lessons. I wasn't actually taking music, but we were having a music lesson. It was early on in school, and he put a piece of ruler in my hook, which I was wearing at the time, and he just started getting me to strum E, which is, you know, and then I learned just simple stuff like that, and then I went on to, you know, learn all sorts of, you know, like the just to practice, you know, with the just getting it right, really, just getting it in the right place. And then comes the sort of feeling that you can put into it, and you go beyond sort of physicality then, I think. That comes from your spirit, you know.
One day when I was about 13, my dad came home with a 58 Esquire that he'd won in a pool game. He played pool, hustled pool quite a bit, and he won it in a pool game. So he comes home with his guitar and he says, "Here, try this thing out." So I opened the case, and it's a 58 Esquire, mint shape, no wear at all on it. The lacquer's still on the frets, coffee stain on the case, and no marks on the thing at all. So I pick it up, and it's like, yeah, it's kind of neat. It's real weird. It's different than my Stratocaster. But so he said, "Well, I think, you know, if you want to play, you need to have a couple good guitars. You get that one now." He said, "This will be another good one. I think you should play it, and you know, you'll like it eventually. And I think it's a good sound. And a lot of country guys use those guitars. Buck Owens' band, they all got them. Merle Haggard's band, they all got them. Waylon's got one, and all this stuff." So I was like, "Oh, all right, kind of thing." So the more I wound up playing on the thing, the more it just felt comfortable to me.
Now the Esquires were sort of the budget model of the Telecaster. The guitar is cut out exactly the same as the Telecaster, with the slot for the second pickup, but to save a few dollars, these guitars were a few dollars less than the Telecaster.
I had a Super Reverb at that point that I was playing through, and I played that Esquire the first night with the band on that weekend, and that was it. I was hooked. That was it. I never touched a Stratocaster. I've used it since in a few sessions, recordings and things, but from then on I was just bit by the tone. That bridge pickup just was like, that's it. That's what I want. It's got all that. And I can still got that tone, and got all those kind of sounds that I was shooting for.
Because they're cut out the same, if you wanted to change this pick guard, you wanted to put another pickup in there, it's just a matter of wiring it up and putting another guard on there.
Okay, so I got the P90 from a buddy of mine, and I cut a hole, took the pick guard off, and I cut a hole, and with a screwdriver and a hammer, and I put the pickup in, and it took me probably 3 days to figure out the switch, because the switch inside these things is, for a 14-year-old, it's like a spaceship. I didn't know. It had a bunch of little things looked like chiclets on there. I didn't know shit from wild honey about what did what, So I get in there with of course I got my dad's Weller soldering gun, which is a great big thing for doing plumbing, It's just so you put it on the pot and go, and it just almost melt. It was that hot. So I get in there and I'm fishing around, and I got the thing plugged into my amp, and I got a screwdriver, and I'm touch with on the metal, and I'm going, nothing, and I'm writing stuff down. All these there's 4 little lugs on each side. But on this old Esquire, they got a couple little wires that loop inside the holes of the rivets, and I'm thinking, what the hell? Anyway, long story short, 3-4 days of coming home from school, messing with this thing, and finally I got the thing going. And I got it. Actually, I wired it up right, but I started over. I just took the little loops out, and then I laid the screwdriver across the tabs until I got what I wanted out of them. Figured out that I run like all the switches nowadays, it seems like, wired it up. Anyway, it worked fine. It was good. Put the pickup in, but the P90 was a lot louder, so I had to dig the hole deeper, sink it down a little more, and then jack this pickup up. But of course, the thing sounded amazing. So that was that. I used that guitar, and I thought, well, I got the P90 from a Les Paul, so I'll sound like all the rock guys and the blues guys. And then I got my country guy tone with all this stuff going on. I don't have to talk to nobody.
I mean, I know people that are really into guitars, and they buy all kinds of different guitars, and I'm really the opposite. I think I've had about 5-6 guitars in my life, and I've still got 4 of them. In the 60s, when I would learn to play, my guitar hero was Mick Green from Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, and he played the Telecaster, so I wanted a Telecaster. Now, in the music shop in Southend, they had a Telecaster in the window. This guitar cost £107. Now, I mean, this was a fortune then. I mean, my dad was a gas fitter. I think he earned 12 quid a week, right? So I used to go and gawp at this guitar in the window and wish it was mine. And eventually, they weren't very fashionable at that time. We're talking about 1965, I think, 66, something like that. And they knocked the price down to a straight 100 quid to shift it. And I thought, I must have it. Now, my mum would never let me have anything on credit. HP, we used to call it then. I thought, I must have the guitar. So what I did was I went into the shop and I said, listen, can you give me a book like so I can pay every week? You keep the guitar and so what I would do is every Saturday I'd save up all my money all week, dinner money, everything, you know. And on Saturday I would go in there with a few quid I'd got together, or whatever it was, pay them, and they would write it down in this book, and they would bring the guitar out and let me play it for half an hour in the shop. Right? And I did it anyway. This went on for some time, and then it came to the summer holidays, and there was still about 60 quid, I think, to pay. I mean, it's a ridiculous fortune. And what I did was I persuaded my girlfriend in secret to draw out all of her money out of the post office, 60 quid, and went and paid for the Telecaster, and I got my Telecaster. I never did pay her back, but I did marry her, and we had 40 very happy years together. When Dr. Fieger got going, I was still twanging on the guitar. I didn't want to take this Telecaster on the road anymore. It was a bit too sentimentally precious. So I looked in the back of the Melody Maker, found a pre-CBS Telecaster for sale, and got it. And I took the fancy to have it red and black colour. So I got a red scratch plate made and sprayed it black. I think it was, you can see, it was originally sunburst, and made my red and black Telecaster, and that is the guitar really that I've used ever since. And I mean, it's every record I've ever made and most of the gigs I've ever done, it's this. Well, the thing I love about Telecaster is it's very, very simple. Exactly the way I play. Simplicity, see. So I mean, I play. It's the gaps you leave, really. Like like that, see. Choppy. You can go on like that for hours, really. Very simple. I mean, like, when I use the guitar, it's always I just use a back pickup, like with a switch back. Both knobs turned up full. Put the amplifier on, all the settings on the middle. I don't use any foot pedals or effects or anything like that. So it's all very, very basic, which is... the Telecaster is the most basic plank of wood with microphones on it, and it's beautiful, and I love it.
Oh, even say I do. Ooh, ooh, ah. Just we two.
Actually, sometimes I used to bleed, you see, because I don't use a pick. Right, and I go to people, you know, so fingers bleeding there, and people say, you know, that's why I use a red scratch plate, you know, so the men won't see the blood. It doesn't hurt anymore. I'm desensitised. I have got a Stratocaster actually, which is surely one of the design classics of the 20th century, right? I mean, a Stratocaster, beautiful thing, right? I love it, right? But it's all contoured and that. But the Telecaster, you can see it's been cut out of a lump of wood. right? But it's all you need. It's just got this fierce sound, and I just can't imagine playing any other kind of guitar, you know. If you have a determined expression on your face, it doesn't matter, you know, all the bum notes or anything you play, man. You know.
I picked up a guitar, having not ever played guitar before. I went straight to electric guitar because the times were right. You know, 1976, it didn't matter if you could play or not because of the Sex Pistols. It was all about attitude. And actually, I went out and bought a Les Paul Jr., just like that. I played it for about 6 months, and Keith Levine from Pill, Public Image, was teaching me to play guitar. And I said, I'm not getting the right sound out of this. I want like something really trebly that really cuts through, sort of a mosquito-y sound. He said, you've got to get a Telecaster. That's the guitar for you. And I went to the shop, played loads of Teles. And by then, I had a little bit of money left to me by my grandmother, and I bought my first Telecaster in 1962. And I learned really to play guitar on a Telecaster, so it became like part of me. I wasn't geeky or nerdy. I wasn't someone, you know, knew how to play brilliantly. I'd never had a music lesson in my life, so I sort of grew up through the Telecaster. You know, I was pretty young, and I learned to make sounds just that my ears liked, and I developed this quite sort of oriental atonal thing on the top 3 strings that I've got known for now, and it became like my voice, and Keith Levine sort of taught me to use the instrument as part of me, like a true instrument. As I was learning to play, and I was playing on the Telecaster, reggae was slowly being introduced into England. England was like the first country really that reggae infiltrated the young scene, brought by Don Letts, who had a sound system. And so reggae and punk came together, and we were the first band, the Slits, to ever play with a reggae band on same tour. We brought sort of reggae to the young audiences as we toured around England. And they used Telecasters as well, the guitarists in the reggae bands, because you needed a guitar with a lot of treble and a lot of bite that could really cut through over that deep throbbing bass and, you know, the insistent drumming. Only the Telecaster can do that, I think. They can cut through anything without being over the top, without being unsubtle, without being ugly. It can cut through. You don't have to shout with a Telecaster. It's just such a subtle but sort of a piercing, beautiful guitar. To me, it's the ultimate guitar. Nothing else will do.
I said too hard. How goes it? And heart replied, right as a Rinston Pippin.
The Tele guys are always seem to be guitar heroes. You got your James Burtons and, you know, Albert Lees. I mean, these guys are just such, and they're real traditional to that kind of guitar playing. And it's the thing that everybody wants to listen to. I mean, all the sessions you've done and all the playing, I mean, people are always wanting to get his sound, so they're calling me to make a pickup to sound like you and all this stuff, you know?
That's right.
And then I tell them,
of course, they sound just like them, don't
yeah,
they?
Sound
Can you fix my sound?
Yeah. And then I tell them to listen to it.
I bought a guitar off Red. Can you fix it?
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. And then after I make the pickup for him, I say, yeah, listen to it after I'm gone. You know?
Yeah.
And then tell me what you think. You know? But yeah, it's fun. I mean, with me, I get so many kids, you know, wanting to, you know, sound like Brent or
people, sure.
Keith
A lot of
Urban,
Telecaster
a lot
guys.
Of it's more Tele guys, I think, than anything, you know.
Yeah.
And
that's great.
But you know what's really neat
Fantastic tone.
too? We were talking earlier how the guitar in the hands of, like you and me, you can play my guitar, but you'll sound like you,
Right?
Yeah.
And you'll sound like you, and I'll sound like me.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
and it's really neat.
The same
how,
guitar, and it just takes on a whole different character.
Whole different feel.
Yeah.
So, you know, you try to explain to kids, even though you may have the same equipment as the person you really want to be like, that sometimes you just don't, you know, achieve it, you know, because you don't have the hands or the approach, you know, and it's just...
it's a combination, isn't it?
Yeah, so many variables.
And it's like Abigail. You know, Abigail winds her pickups at Fender, how Abigail... It's just what's in her. It's like her brush stroke.
Her style.
Right.
You know, her style. You know, it's like, you know, she has a certain technique of how she does it, how fast, how hard, the pressure, the attack, all that. And it's like when you're winding, you know, and it's all that. She's
her choice of notes is how much she wants to go and how fast.
That's right.
It's like her way of playing.
Her way of being expressive.
Making a solo.
And she's got the foot pedal down here, you know, so if she wants to put the
volume
pedal to the metal.
That's right,
Go Abigail. You know? And I think that's great.
That's right.
You know? But, you know, she's... it was like Seth Lover, too. Abigail and Seth Lover are very humble. You know, they don't realize the impact that they have done on other people. Well, like Leo Fender, too. With the guitar, what they've done, how it's influenced so many other people, and how it's created so many other jobs in the music field, you know. And it's given me a job. I mean, I was like a little kid, you know, writing the Fender and buying my Venture records and sneaking them to school so I could look at what chord he was playing. I was trying to learn that A7th chord, man. Couldn't figure out how to hold that sucker down, you know. And when I mastered that A7th chord, man, I just felt like I walked around class with a different attitude, you know, type of thing.
That's right.
But it was neat. But all of us have influence. I mean, we all listen to each other, and we're all clones of each other in a sense, you know, which is really neat, you know.
And through the Telecaster, really.
Yeah, it really is, you know.
Telecaster, I think you said earlier, it's kind of associated with an older player style. And, you know, my style is a younger man's style of guitar playing. And so the people that are interested in what I do are purchasing Telecasters. So I'm influencing a different generation that maybe would be, you know, years ago they would be playing a different kind of more of a hot-rodded guitar, you know, and so these younger people are hearing me play, they like the sound, and they're buying Telecasters, and so it's a whole new generation of people that are exposed to a guitar that's been around for so long. I got known for playing with Telecaster to the point where Fender approached me about doing a signature model. And so that's what this is. It's my signature model. Telecaster has custom sized frets. The neck size is larger than most Fenders that you would pull off the rack. It has a drop detuner, which is kind of cool. And I removed the tone and turned this into a series parallel switch. So when you have it like this, series, you turn it like that, it becomes parallel, which gives you an extra, you know, sound. It's good for lead tones. It's a mid-range boost when I turn this. So it's a little bit of a hot-rodded guitar. Also, I added comfort cuts, so it has more of a Strat kind of thing when you get it close to your body. The only thing about a Telecaster that bugs me is the squareness against your body. And now, by adding this and a slight contour here, it becomes more of a comfortable guitar.
Okay, well, this guitar is a stock Telecaster. I went into the store in 1987 in Vancouver, where I was living at the time. And at the time, I played a blonde Telecaster, straight blonde, kind of like Albert Collins' Tele. And I remember I saw this Paisley up on the wall, and they had just re-released these guitars with the Paisley, and I never had seen one, you know, in the flesh, as they say. And I looked up and I just said, I have to have that. I have to have that. It's going to be my signature guitar. And I got it. And it's been with me since 1987. It's the same guitar. I've thrown it. I've beaten it. It's got scars and wounds. And it's got the same original neck. It's got the same original pickups. The only thing that changed about this guitar is this knob had fallen off. I had two of these knobs here, and one of them had fallen off, and one day at a gig, somebody saw that I had no knob there, so he just popped this Strat knob on here. And he just popped it on. I wasn't even thinking about it. This guy just came up and like, poop, popped it on. And it's just stayed. But what I like about this is that I know where I am. I can just reach down and I know which knob I'm turning. I'm not turning, you know, so I know when I'm turning volume, know when I'm turning tone. So I got really comfortable with that. The pickups are stock. So this bridge pickup is real hot. It's got the real, when you really want to turn it up and get that real nasty, hard Tele sound, it's there. And then this neck pickup is just real soft and clean, real straightforward, and I haven't changed anything. I mean, I'm basically a blues guitar player. That's where my style came from. I learned from a country blues artist, and I started playing with a thumb pick early on and using my fingers and playing with an open hand. So I've always been comfortable with my hand open. My very favorite guitar player of all time is Clarence Gatemouth Brown, who I think also played a Tele early in his career. The Texas guitar player, and he played with an open hand. So I've always, and Albert Collins played with no pick. Muddy Waters used a thumb pick. So I kind of emulated those guys. I kind of used it, like I use my fingers a lot, and I use my thumb pick a lot. And I do a lot of, because I was schooled in Texas blues, I use a lot of E's and A's and open chords and ringing notes in order to bring our sound fuller. Because I traveled trio for many years, and this gig tonight I'm a trio as well. So in order to get comfortable as a trio player, you have to get comfortable with your open notes and being able to keep the sound really full. And so that's what I do. I use my open hand. I use my thumb pick a lot to hold the bass strings down at the same time while I'm, you know, so everything I do, I try to keep that rolling bass into it and that sort of one-man band feeling. So I could play just about anything from my show. I could play it solo. I could play it trio. I could play it in a quartet. I could play it 5-piece. But it all comes down to like that I could actually play everything solo.
I saw Sue when she was 12. No, well, she was very, very young, you know. And I just remember her. She came to Virginia on tour. And she was amazing. And I knew she was, at the time, she was living in Austin before she went back to Canada. And, you know, I'd seen her, but we had never really got to hook up or you know, really play together. And then one day I got a phone call a couple years ago. Hey, you know, Sue Foley's going to be in this tour, and, you know, would you like to be a part of it? And I said, yes, you know, because, you know, I'd heard her music. And I know she did the Texas kind of thing, you know, which, you know, that's her style, and she's probably the best at it, in my opinion. I think she's the best at that, what she does.
fact that women are underrepresented in the guitar world, that inspired me to start writing this book that I've been working on for 10 years called Guitar Woman. And I've been interviewing women guitar players for almost 10 years, and I know there's thousands of them out there because I can't even keep up with the volume of the interviews I have to do. But I also found that a lot of these women, and I've traveled on several shows with women guitar players, a lot of women like Telecasters.
It is such a man's world. It really is. I mean, I think it's becoming more of a, you know, there is room for women in it, and I think women are really kicking through, to be honest. You know, but it is so, you know, it is male orientated. If you're not a man, you've got to try twice as hard as a bloke to get anywhere. You really have, because if you don't, you'll just kind of sit at the back and mill about, and you won't really play, and you won't push yourself. And to me, in the past it's worked a real disadvantage being a girl, because it's like, when I was growing up and playing at jam sessions and things, it were like, well, she's a girl, you know, she can't play. We're not going to play with her, which kind of made me play how I play, because there were nobody to play solos for me. They'd all go outside and drink beer, and I was stood there playing, you know, a drummer and a bass player that would play with me, and I had nobody to play solos for me, which meant that I had to learn how to play lead guitar because nobody else would do it for me. Which now I'm really, really grateful that they won't play with me. And, you know, we had all the things of she should be at home playing with the dolls. You know, as a 12-year-old girl going and playing blues, she should be, you know, playing with dolls. She's a Barbie doll and all this.
As I got into my career and doing the career thing, and meeting all my peers who now respect me, it was pretty tough. You know, to hear stuff like, you know, she's not bad for a girl, this kind of stuff. But what's the girl doing here? You know, because there wasn't very many of us when I started my career. And there's almost an explosion of them right now.
I'll cast my net until I reel it in. I'll cast my spell until I'm gonna win. I'll glamour you with my perfect lies. I won't give up.
moment I'm using the Fret Kings. I'm using the Super S and the Super T, which this one's basically, it's the Tele body, but we've got a Strat configuration pickups, and we've got the 5-way switching, and the neck's pretty close to a Strat as well, rather than a Telecaster, but it looks like a Tele, which is great because I love the Tele shape. I use the Super T, which is also really, really good. It's incorporated the contouring and the 3-way pickup selection, but it's also at the slant, so you can flick it and you're at the right pickup selection that you want. It's a lot more chunky neck, which is closer to the Telecaster, but I'd actually say it's probably still more of a Strat neck than a Telecaster neck. I find Telecaster neck's really, really chunky, whereas that one's a bit more sort of slimline. But yeah, I think Leo would be very happy that people are imitating his guitars and, you know, doing such a good job with them.
I can tell by your eyes that I'm no good for you.
I love the neck pickup, absolutely love it. For me, it's really, really mellow. It's a lot rootsier. I mean, I'm not somebody who likes a lot of high frequency stuff. I like things really sort of bassy and rootsy. And from the neck pickup on like the Fret Kings or the Telecasters or anything, I just love it. It's just got a lot more balls with it. It's, you know, it's really gutsy, and I can get quite a lot of bluesy sounds out of it. It's great.
I'm moving on now, I walk away. I'm checking out, there's nothing left to say. You should be careful what you wish for. I'm going now and leave you wanting more. What do you want from me? See right through you watching me.
I think for a guitar that's been around for 60 years to be still at the forefront of, you know, sales, I think is fantastic. You know, that just proves to me what an iconic instrument it is. You know, for something to be around that long and you've still got kids going down to the music shops today saying, I want a Telecaster. Well, it says it all, doesn't it, really? It's, you know, it says it's a wonderful instrument that just does its job. You know, it's a real sturdy instrument that I think will stand another probably 3 times 60 years. I think they're brilliant.
I can tell by your eyes that I'm no good for you.
The technique that I use is varied. Sometimes I'll mainly like to use my thumb and maybe a couple fingers, depending on what kind of tone I want to get. Like for a lot of blues stuff, the old, the Delta blues stuff, you want that, you want to be able to pull and, just get nice little tonalities with using a couple fingers. And sometimes I'll have a pick in between these 2 fingers and kind of do a hybrid thing. But for me personally, for rhythm work, I really like just to use this finger. I got that from Clive Brown. I kind of like that, It hurts like crap, but, you get used to it. You get a nice little rough callus up there. It gives you a different tone there. And then for like hardcore You know, like if I'm doing hardcore rock stuff or something, I will like just to pick, you know, because it's got to dig, you know. If I'm doing that Stevie Ray ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching stuff, you know, you got to kind of dig. So I'll use a pick for that sometimes. It just really depends on the song, because what I like to do when I write my songs is try to get the guitar. The guitar is a voice also with my voice, and I have my voice is I'm still working on my voice. My voice is it's always, you know, evolving, if you will. Downward. No, I mean tonality wise, you know. So when I'm writing a song, I will kind of adjust the tones so the tones will so I can marry up the tones with my voice to make it sound good. So there's a lot of things. I mean, you know, and of course I do little tricks and stuff, you know, snare rakes and, you know, hammer-ons and pull-offs and all that kind of stuff. But basically with the it's just a matter of, you know, I'm like connecting with this instrument to make it all a part of me.
The thing I liked about the Paisley is that I wanted something that people would recognize me immediately by. And when I saw that guitar, I said, you know, they're going to see that. And people do. Now they always say, where's your Paisley? If I don't bring it to a show, they're always like, hey, or when are you going to play your Paisley? Did you bring your Paisley? So it's become like my signature kind of look, which I think is really cool, you know. This is my guitar, and I've played it in every show for over 20 years. So, and I remember when I first went to Texas and met Clifford Antone, the head of Antone's Records and Antone's nightclub, and I'd only had this guitar for a few years at the time, and he picked it up and he said, it's a nice guitar, it plays well. He goes, but you know, you really got to put some soul into it. It's going to take a few years. And I know what he means, because after, you know, you play something for so long, it just takes on a life of its own, you know, and this guitar has, I don't know, every note I've played on it, every night, every good night, every bad night, it's all in this guitar, so it's got a lot of soul to it now.
I like to pick up my Strat now and again. I've got on the old tremolo arm and all that, but no, you know, Telecaster.
5 strings, 3 notes, 2 fingers and 1 asshole. And then you got it, you know.
Sing, Heavenly Muse.
Old man in his bathrobe, he's wondering where I've been. He's reading the New Testament, smoking a Herbert Terratin. Sneaking around the back door, bound to be my best bet. 7 a.m., I ain't been to bed yet.
Well, it just goes back to the beginning. I mean, you know what I mean? That was one of the first ones I ever came across, you know, and seeing guys around Texas on TV. I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, and there was a local television show called Cowtown Jamboree in Fort Worth, and there was one called Big D Jamboree out of Dallas, and most of those guys were playing, you know, Fender guitars, mostly Teles, Esquires, you know, you'd see a Strat or a 335 once in a while, but the twangy guys were the ones that stuck out, you know what I mean? And you would see Merle Haggard would come through there with the Strangers, his band, and Roy Nichols was a guitar player in that band. That's the first thing that I really remember hearing that sound and being interested in it, you know, some of the country guys. And there was another guy that named Phil Baugh, who was mostly a session player from around, I'm not exactly sure where he was from. He was around Dallas for a long time. Then he took up residency at the Hall of Fame Inn in Nashville and played there for years. But he's got an album called, originally the album was called Country Guitar, and my dad heard it on the radio one day coming home from work, and he stopped and bought the album and brought it home and said, now if you learn to play like this guy, you can be a guitar player. And I have been working on it ever since. I just, I can't get there from here, I guess.
Coconut Grove on the Jacksboro Highway, playing waltz across Texas, honky-tonk and hideaway.
Well, Jacksboro Highway, by the time I got there, it was, it had been this, it was, they used to call it the Jack's Beer Highway, because going way back, old Texas stuff. And it was, they would find shallow graves out there, and it was just a row of nightclubs that went all the way out from Fort Worth, way on out toward Springtown, Texas, out in there, and it was just all beer joints out there. And they say that you could get about it, like the song says, the further down that road you go, the rougher it's going to get. And it was like that, I guess, mostly before I got there, because by the time I got there, I started playing there when I was 13 or 14, I guess 14, 15 years old. And it was basically just a bunch of old beer joints that we'd go out there. And it was really a good place to learn how to play, And after you'd learn some tunes, because, they were really forgiving out there because, you know what I mean? You didn't have to be the best on the block, you know what I'm saying? But they were all entertained by it. I remember my dad always said, you're going to get tired of smelling cigarettes and whiskey out there. And he was right. I'm here to tell you today. I'm glad I'm playing a nice venue tonight.
Making my best play, pretty sure I'm winning her. Just turned 17, I'm full of piss and vinegar. Young and dumb in a 64 Falcon. Got to make the gig before 9:30 come. Red lights start to flash, pull it over to the right. Something wrong, fuse is blown, ticket for no tail lights. Howling at the moon. $4 buys a hangover of doom. #1 prescription for a thirst you can't slake. Made Milwaukee famous, gave me a headache.
I gotta tell you, back in the 50s, I met the man, Leo Fender. And Leo and I became real good friends. As a matter of fact, I spoke to him back in the 50s about what would he think about me doing a signature guitar. Well, his answer was, well, son, if you put your name on a product, be sure you're 100% correct with what you want to do.
To me, as an electric guitar maker, Leo's the king. And nobody's going to top it.
If I could say anything to him, I'd just say thank you for making such wonderful guitars. You've really inspired so many other guitar manufacturers and so many players as well. If there were no Telecasters or Stratocasters around, what would we be playing? Who knows? Would we be playing?
Thank you.